Welcome to the Startup Grind.
All right. Hello, everyone. As Rich introduced us, we are AI/ML engineers from Huloop. My name is Prakhar.
And I'm Ishan.
And yeah, we're excited to give this presentation today.
All right. So, as the title says, we'll kind of be talking about how AI is leading the automation industry and transformations, and what are the major challenges that are still standing in the way. So let's just take an example of a bank, right? So imagine you're a bank employee, normal day, you're going about your work, and then there's a surprise audit that, demands that you have to present some regulatory proof that's spread across different documents. You have multiple sources, some answers from source A, some answers from source B. You don't have enough time, and you also want to ground your answers in the truth that is present in this document. So in this situation, what can you do and what technology can you use? So this is where Retrieval-Augmented Generation, or RAG for short, comes in, where it combines retrieval systems with generative AI, and it's ensuring that responses are grounded in real, true data. So it cites sources, which is the most important component. So you can always refer to where you found that information instead of, just making stuff up. Hallucinations are a big problem with LLMs. We all know that. And it's improving accuracy, recency, and trustworthiness of the outputs, because all the data sources can be versioned and it automatically takes the latest version. So you're not relying on outdated information. And the another thing that it can accomplish is that it's bridging the gap between static model training and dynamic real-world knowledge. So just getting a little bit into behind the scenes of RAG. So this is just a sample user query. So I want to know what's the latest in AI regulation. So I have a retriever setup that scans all the documents in my knowledge base, retrieves all the information that is relevant, and also uses external knowledge, so Google or any other search engine, to formulate a natural language powered response which is grounded, accurate, and easily understandable by a user, no matter the proficiency in the subject matter. Why it matters? We talked about the hallucination problem of LLMs, citing sources, very important, doesn't make up stuff. It's providing domain-specific expertise in, various verticals. So it can kind of become a master in any of these, given that its knowledge base is sufficient enough. Human errors are a part of responses just because of, external factors, and, humans make errors. So it kind of reduces a lot of these, and it's also changing information by looking at the versioning. So information is changing. It can just look through the versions and is up to date on the latest version. And also compliance and auditability by citing sources. We've spoken about that. So now let's talk about some of the latest advancements that are going around in this field. So the first one is hybrid retrieval. This is basically combining semantic search, which uses embeddings, with keyword searches, so that the response that's generated has a wider breadth of information searched. And context optimization kind of ties into that. So by using re-rankers and dynamic chunking, you can improve the context that's fed into the RAG system, which in turn also generates a better response. In terms of enterprise adoption, we've seen Microsoft, Bloomberg, Salesforce all incorporate RAG into their latest Copilots and AI assistants. And healthcare, finance, and customer support industries are one of the major users of RAG, just because of the use case. In fact, we also kind of used it for a similar purpose in terms of helping answer user queries about our platform. And the latest trend that's emerging actually is multimodal RAG. So we've only talked about text retrieval and textual responses, but now RAG can also support bringing it code and images and other multimedia into its response. So with that, Prakhar will be talking about how AI has transformed data extraction.
Thank you, Ishan. So I'm going to set the scene really quick. Imagine you're a grocery store owner. As a grocery store owner, you have an insane amount of documents to keep track of. You have invoices, you have receipts, inventory, payroll. There are too many documents for you to keep track of. And what is the fix to this problem? What technologies can we leverage to really take advantage of what's emerging trends in the industry And I think the solution to this problem is AI-driven data extraction. So I would first like to cover kind of the evolution of automation and how it pertains to data extraction, then we'll go from there. So before we start, it would be kind of important to set some ground rules. What is data extraction specifically? And truthfully, it's basically what I'm saying. It's the idea of extracting specific data from documents. Those documents can range from a wide variety of sources. They could be PDFs, they could be real-world books, they could be websites, anything that has information that you can extract that data from, that's a document. And so if you think about it that way, humans have been performing this idea of data extraction for hundreds of years. Receipts, paper receipts have existed for a really long time. Inventories existed. So that's kind of where our story starts. I think originally where the story of data extraction begins, it's grounded in a lot of grunt work, a lot of people looking at specific values and trying to parse them out. And so take advancements in the last couple of decades, now we have programmatic ways of extracting data from documents. And these algorithms, we can go to, for example, Tesseract OCR. That was Google's original OCR technique. And these methods, they are groundbreaking at the time because now we're able to extract real text that you can parse into a string, into a program, from a picture. That was incredibly groundbreaking at the time. And now let's look at what's going on today. And we have this idea of AI-driven data extraction, the idea of not only can we understand the textual information in a document, but we can also understand the structure of the document. We can understand where are the headers, where are the columns, what data is important. Do we want to extract all the data? Do we want to extract a little bit of the data? This is where I think AI really makes its mark here for the story. And so before proceeding on to this idea of AI-driven data extraction, it's very important to cover what is computer vision and how does that enable us to better extract data. So let's go back to the grocery store example really quick. Imagine that you have imagine on this table, there's a ton of receipts, they're scattered all over. We can use computer vision to isolate those specific receipts and extract data from each one of them, extract what is the invoice number, what are the items on those receipts, so on and so forth. Computer vision refers to this idea of helping computers see. At the end of the day, all this is on the screen is just a set of pixels. It's meaningless information to a computer unless we help it understand. And so the idea behind computer vision is helping computers see, and specifically as it relates to what I'm talking about, helping AI see, being the eyes that AI needs to really see, where the AI, the LLM might be the brains of what we're doing. The computer vision algorithms that are being implemented, those are the eyes that the AI uses to see the world. And this is especially important when it comes to data extraction, what I was just talking about, because earlier I was saying that using computer vision and modern AI data extraction techniques, all these receipts, we can take a picture of them and use these computer vision techniques to really understand how to isolate the different receipts and so on and so forth. And so this story is kind of incomplete without mentioning computer vision. And it's worth noting that computer vision is a huge field. It encompasses a lot more than just taking pictures of receipts, but it's very old, and through advancements in machine learning, it's progressing faster than ever before. And so now I've talked a lot about this data extraction, but it's important to realize, why do we need data extraction? And again, we can go back. I'll go back to the grocery store example. You guys might be tired of it, but I think it illustrates my point quite well, that using data extraction, we can help these grocery stores, we can help these law firms, we can help them scan these documents and make their lives a lot easier. But I think something that might be a little more important for this crowd specifically is, why do we need data extraction as it relates to AI? And I think, as everyone in this room will know, in order to train an AI model, we need loads and loads of data, like an unfathomable amount of data. And the way, as I've described data extraction, this is specifically the tool we need to extract that data. So the most important reason why data extraction is so prevalent and why it's making so many advancements today is because these are the techniques that we're using to train the AI models. These are the methods that we're using to scan through the textbook pages to extract the text from the textbook and feed it into the model so that we can have better trained models. And at the end of the day, this AI-driven data extraction is what's really powering and what's really driving the most sophisticated advancements in AI foundational model technology, because without these loads of data, these models cannot become more sophisticated. And so now I think I'll get to the heart of what I'm talking about. How do we compare traditional data extraction methods to these AI-powered agentic data extraction methods? So I think the first thing to take note of is speed. A human needs to pay very close attention to the work that they're doing, and by paying that close attention, they obviously need to slow down a little bit, make sure that the column is exactly right for the data that they want to extract. They need to make sure that the row number is right, so on and so forth. And this is a time-consuming process. It's hard, it's tedious work, and it takes time. And this is time that the AI could do it a lot faster. And it gets to one of my other points, which is scalability. It is much easier to scale and deploy a large number of AI models to extract data from these documents than it would be to send out a task force of a lot of humans that are doing the same job. And this also gets into my next point as well, accuracy. By using these agentic AI-powered data extraction techniques, we can expect a certain level of accuracy from the models that we might not be able to really quantify with people. For example, there's the data extraction when humans do it, it's very dependent on how they're feeling. Maybe they didn't sleep that much the night before. Maybe they're having a rough day. So with AI, there is a certain level of consistency and accuracy that we can always expect. And that's very important. But the most important point to me, truthfully, is the idea of freeing up people's time. These data extraction, like as it's traditionally done, as I said before, it's very time consuming, it's very tedious, and it is work that will eventually burn you out because you're doing the same thing over and over again. And it's taxing on the mind as well because you're constantly squinting, trying to look at where is the correct piece of data I'm trying to find. By using these agentic powered AI techniques, we're freeing up people's time to do more meaningful work, and we're helping them burn out less. We are helping them be more satisfied at the workplace. And I think personally that's a very important thing. And it speaks to Huloop's mission as well. But as is the case with a lot of AI technologies and tools, there are challenges. And there are a lot of challenges that I faced as well during my time here. So the first thing that is important to address is data privacy and security. If you're working with sensitive clients, say banks, law firms, healthcare, how do we ensure as the developers that the APIs that we're using, how do we ensure that, don't worry, we're sending our data to Azure AI Foundry, for example, and Microsoft is not going to use this data to train their models. Because if you're a bank and you're sending your invoices to be scanned by Azure Document Intelligence, you want to make sure that people's sensitive financial records aren't being used to train the model because, God forbid, you type in a random prompt to Azure AI and it gives you a bank account number. That would be really bad. So this is a bridge that this is a gap that we need to bridge as developers to ensure is data security and privacy. And this also neatly goes into my second point, which is trust and explainability. We need to convince our clients that what the AI is doing is logical, that it makes sense. In a lot of ways, AI is still very much a black box to us. And although it might not matter to the person who's developing, doing the vibe coding or something like that, to the bank, to the hospital, these things are actually quite important. It's very important to understand, is AI extracting this data for the right reasons? What is the rationale behind it? So this idea of explainability and trust is another gap that we need to bridge. And I've presented a lot of problems, but I think a very nice and obvious solution is actually incorporating some sort of human in the loop step, a hybrid approach that combines agentic AI extraction and human-powered extraction as well. The ability to, when we're extracting the data, we flag the values that are incorrect, that might be problematic, and we say, hey, we need a human to manually review this data to make sure that it's up to code. So that way, we're kind of getting the best of both worlds, and we're making sure that humans are not being left out of this process, because that is a very important point.
That's the name of your company, isn't it?
I'm glad you mentioned that. And that's actually, I mean, I'll speak a little bit to it, but like that's why in the end I am quite glad and quite happy to work at Huloop, because we're making sure that we make sure that humans stay in the loop. We're not kicking them out. We're freeing up people's time. And I think a very nice example to kind of illustrate this challenge has to do with data extraction in sensitive sectors such as healthcare and finance. So one of the challenges that the whole industry faces is this idea of agentic AI extraction. It really enables us to extract data at scale that we've never seen before. But how do we make sure that it's making the right decision? How do we make sure that we have a consistent level of very high accuracy? Because what I mentioned before, you can expect a certain level of accuracy from AI, but how do you make sure that accuracy, rather than being 90%, it's 95, it's 98%? And that's something we're really trying to solve, because ultimately, all of these new kinds of document parsing APIs, think Azure Document Intelligence, Azure Textract, Google Document Cloud, all of these components have a generative element to them. And with generation comes hallucination in one form or another. How do you make sure that the data that is being returned is not being hallucinated? And that's something that we're trying to solve, and the whole industry is trying to solve, is like, how do we make sure that these generative powered document parsing solutions aren't generating the wrong thing, and how do we get that accuracy as high as possible? And so I think this goes to show where, at least at the moment, this agentic AI extraction might not be suited for every domain. Domains such as extracting data to train AI models, an extremely high level of accuracy is not necessarily required. It's not the most important thing in the world, because you're just feeding it into the model to train it to make it better. A typo here and there is not going to be the end of the world. But whereas if you're dealing with people's payroll, if you're dealing with people's benefits, healthcare information, that is real sensitive data that you want to make sure you can guarantee that that's going to be accurate. So it's all about responsibly using AI and making sure that we understand the tools that we're using and that we're considerate.
Don't like most of the enterprises, like they partition their data so it doesn't interact. It's like siloed.
Yeah, that's exactly what we tell our customers, that with Azure, that we have our own Azure instance set up, and we can guarantee you, as guaranteed by Microsoft, that this data will not be used to train their models. So that kind of gets at like the gap that we need to bridge.
But it does train the internal model, doesn't it, like of that institution or that organization?
I think that is definitely, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the data, if we like guarantee in our contract that we're not going to like use this data to train anything, then we have to do that. But at least Microsoft guarantees that they're not going to use the data sent to their APIs to train their model if we have our own instance.
Right, but just for example, if I'm working, I am working with a state agency.
Yes.
And they have their own data. If when there's, I forget what the thing was called, where they silo it.
Yeah.
But if they are just using their own data, shouldn't they just basically give quicker for the employees, quicker response for their own their own data? Is that I mean, that's training, the agent's training itself on its own data.
If it's your own data, then you own the data. So in terms of security and privacy, your own terms and conditions of your company will be probably defining how that data is used. So between using a LLM like Azure, OpenAI or something, so that's sending data over the server, or building your own custom model that is trained on that data. If you've built your model in-house in terms of it never leaves the system, it lives locally, it's a TensorFlow model, let's assume, Keras file. So all the data is packaged into the model because it was trained with it, but then that model also belongs to your institution. Yeah. It's not going anywhere out.
I think unless there's a continuous like kind of CI/CD pipeline specifically saying, because I mean, most of the APIs have to specifically say that this data, the model is continuously being trained on the data that it's receiving. And I don't think most of the state-of-the-art models, at least they're commercially available, do that right now.
So you guys are mostly working with enterprise, right?
Yes.
So like for instance, I'm pretty sure the only AI approved for the state is Copilot, which is just a version. So does Copilot, like if I'm partitioned, it sounds like Copilot almost becomes its own model for that agency.
Yeah, it's like siloed, as you said. Especially with the Azure government AI. They have like a specific version just for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the other companies, are you able to do the same, let's say with Anthropic or OpenAI? Can you do its own instance as well?
I think they're definitely, it depends. Like I'm not an expert, I guess, on kind of like Anthropic versus OpenAI's policies. I think the reason that a lot of agencies opt for Azure is because there is that guarantee that Microsoft is this legacy company and they have a lot to lose. But I think based on my best judgment, I think you could do the same thing with any other provider, but you just have to make sure you take a close look at the terms and conditions.
Well, nobody ever got fired for buying Microsoft. Right?
Well, I reviewed Governor Newsom had this AI executive order, and there was another thing from another agency, and it's almost like Microsoft went there ahead of time and wrote the requirements.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, so it's like one of the requirements is that there has to be a record of all the AI chats.
Yeah.
So that's an automatic.
I mean, New York Times actually had a very similar lawsuit as well.
Yeah.
That guy have opened up that was supposed to be like a model around GPT that was specific for government and completely siloed for government.
I can't speak to that, honestly.
They have a deal with.
Yeah, you have a deal.
Well, I think that's Copilot, essentially.
OpenAI.
Right, it's OpenAI's ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is essentially, I mean, Copilot is essentially
Okay.
ChatGPT, except just the Microsoft version.
Well, I just read it as OpenGov. They called it OpenGov. That's for the.
Right, but it's almost like when I read, it's like they wrote the instructions, so they kind of excluded any competitors from working in the enterprise.
You can get Anthropic on AWS with the similar terms.
I think we'll take more questions at the end. I'll quickly wrap up with my last slide anyways. But let's go back to my favorite grocery store. What does the future look like for this grocery store? So the way that I envision it, this grocery store owner has invested a lot of time and effort into their data processing pipeline. Now they have Agentic AI powering the invoices that are extracted, the inventory, everything is automated now. And this has freed up the time for the store owner's workers to do more impactful work around the store. And now workplace burnout is less, workplace satisfaction is higher, grocery store is doing better than ever before, all due to the magic and awesomeness of agentic powered data extraction. So exactly. So please, the grocery store owner is doing very well in my universe. And with that, I'll end my presentation. It should be noted my section of the presentation, our presentation.
Any questions there?
So I'm aware that OpenAI and ChatGPT has connectors that you can connect to like CRM systems and whatnot to pull information and add additional. How does that compare to what you guys are doing?
So with connectors, yes, that's automatic pulling of information. But if you have your own databases that store relevant information for your use case, then you can just kind of handle that database and create a knowledge base from that. So RAG kind of comes into that. So OpenAI, you can integrate RAG with it directly, where you create your knowledge bank, your knowledge base, which has all these different data sources in a format that is understandable by the AI through the prompt that you'll be defining, and then you can communicate with it. So we don't use connectors as such.
I think I'd like to also like add on, like I think the connectors are also a lot more consumer facing and they're quite focused in what they do. And as a result, they're also a little bit more limited in scope. So for like enterprise use and for like large scale like API use and stuff like that, the connectors are specialized to kind of help individual consumers as much as they can. But from a developer API perspective, they're not as useful for us because of the volume that we're like hitting these endpoints.
Because I work with a lot of companies,
Okay.
you know, who are trying to adopt AI.
Mhm.
And from my perspective, it's, you know, just look at these connect. You already have HubSpot that you're using for your CRM.
Mhm.
Just, you know, look into using the connectors and then, you know, you have less things to break, right?
Yeah.
It's already seamlessly integrated. So that's why I'm asking why would I recommend you guys versus doing it that way. That's what I'm asking.
Another consideration that's important is that if your data is good to go as it is, or if it needs some, filtering, sorting, if the data needs modifications along the way for it to be usable, then using connectors directly would not be the best way to handle this issue. So when you have your own database, you have more control over the data. You can kind of mold it like you want and then feed it into the system. But if the data is already, arranged as you would want it, structured data, cleaned out, no sensitive information, all that kind of thing, because that's an important consideration in this case where even where, okay, Microsoft's guaranteeing that the data is not going to be used as a best practice, taking out sensitive information is the first thing you would do. PII, that sort of stuff. Again, company policies vary, but just as a general practice.
And I think it's also important to keep in mind that with the connectors, they're very much focused on like what is popular with like users right now. Like it's like all the most popular kind of technologies, right? Like the connectors can interact with Google Drive, interact with Slack, so on and so forth. But to answer why would you recommend us versus like the connectors, there's no connector for like a legacy database silo, like there's no connector for this random server that's like thrown in the back of like a storage room and like only like it exists on like one VPN. So it's kind of like that is how I'd answer that question, where Huloop also does a very good job of integrating a large array of data sources that the connectors just do not support because there's no reason for them to.
When you say connector, are you referring to like the Zapier type function or the Make type function?
I believe it's like their MCP, like their user-facing MCP integrations, where like you can have ChatGPT interface with Google Drive, with Slack, with Teams, and stuff like that.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Easily.
So when you're doing the data extraction, like what is the main format of data that you deal with? Is there a lot of PDF?
It's quite varied, honestly. A lot of it is PDFs, but most of it is definitely PDFs. But like to say it's just PDFs, I believe would be kind of an understatement because there's no regulation for PDFs, There's no kind of like a PDF must have this format. PDFs are so wildly different in nature that there's no structural guarantee a lot of the time. And that's, again, like I think that's something the whole industry is kind of working around. You would think like PDFs are such like an archaic file format. They're so old that this problem had to have been solved by now. But what I've learned through a lot of literature review that it's not. It's actually quite a difficult challenge. And so the ideal pipeline involves converting an unstructured PDF into structured JSON that can predictably be parsed. And that's something that the latest kind of AI models have allowed us to do in a way where if you use the beta versions of the OpenAI SDK, you can opt for a structured response parameter when you call the model. And so what this does is that OpenAI guarantees that the data that is returned via the API call will always be in the same JSON format. And this is really important for consistency. So like to be a little more technical, you define a Pydantic model at the beginning of your file. You feed that into the API call. And OpenAI will guarantee that the data will be returned in a predictable manner. And so this is kind of how we go. It's one of the many steps of going from unstructured PDF to structured JSON.
And when building systems like this, it's important to keep it agnostic in terms of agnostic to the data source. So you can choose one language, like the JSON or whatever, your format, your choice. But that's the language that the model speaks. Now you convert all the sources into that format and then go, because that streamlines your pipeline. Otherwise, you'll be building parallel solutions for every data source.
Do you guys use OCR, any existing technology, or you have your own custom kind of model?
I feel like I've tried every OCR solution under the sun.
OCR?
So I started off with Tesseract because this is a tangent, but I used to use Tesseract to scan my university PDFs that didn't have an OCR layer on top of them, so I could control F to find whatever I needed in the book. But so we started off with OCR, and primarily we use Azure Document Intelligence, which is quite robust, all things considered. It's very good at parsing tabular data, but it's insufficient in some cases. And what we've learned is that different OCR solutions are very good at different things. For example, Dockling is a solution that was developed by IBM Research and it's completely open source. And it amazes me how good that solution is considering it's just local, but it performs as good as, or if not better than most of the APIs that you can use via AWS, Azure, whatever. But for example, like Mistral just came out with their OCR solution, and I found it to be underwhelming when it came to full, like very complex tables, like if you scan a full page. But if you zero in on a small section of a table, it outperforms basically every other model. So this is to say that I think there are a lot of OCR solutions out there, and it's a super crowded space. But by and large, the models, like the big names, are all specialized in a very specific thing. I think document intelligence it's a good all-rounder. Dockling is incredible for local inference, and then Mistral is really good for small tables.
So the visual analysis, which is what OCR is not what you're focusing on. You're using existing OCR solutions, right?
So what we focus on is that, by and large, I think the problem is twofold. I think the first part of the problem is getting a high quality OCR out of whatever you're trying to scan. And this strictly refers to the textual information that you're able to pull out of the document. I think that's the first challenge. The second challenge is structural awareness. And actually, if you scan a table into your code, how accurate is the deeply nested table structure to how true is it to the actual document? And so this is another thing where I can go back to, where different tools are really good at different things. Document intelligence's OCR, just like the pure text extraction, is really solid. But when it comes to its structural format, it's really hard to, it's incredibly hard to parse when you actually go through it in the code and try to do it that way, because there's no guarantee on what the structure is going to be at the end of the day.
So can you give an example of that structure? You could present information in different orders?
So this by structure, what I mean specifically is when you're dealing with deeply nested tables, like if you have a table, say a payroll journal or something like that, and this payroll journal has different dates, it has different states, it has different people, it has different rows, different columns, different headers. And by a certain point, in order to accurately query the table you're trying to extract the data from, you have 7 different keys. You have 7 different levels of information. You need to extract data from this state, from this person on this date. And that nested structure is what most of the state-of-the-art vision models really struggle with. And something that I learned in my research actually was that sometimes using these multimodal models that can parse both text information and images, there's actually a significant drop off in quality compared to just a model that's focused on data, like visual data extraction that doesn't have an LLM component, there's a huge drop off in quality. I think like it's 70% versus like 95, 96% when it comes to comparing how the vision enabled LLMs do on certain tasks versus purely computer vision based models.
Well, I have more of a product question. So like I've played around with Huloop, so the way I kind of framed it in my mind, it's sort of like Zapier for the enterprise. Is that kind of a correct statement or close? Zapier for the enterprise? It's like you can connect lots of different workflow automation. Thank you. Is that maybe an accurate description?
I would say so, yeah, based on my limited knowledge of Zapier.
So that's kind of like, and then I had a project with Microsoft, and then they have something, I don't know if you had a chance, so that's how I kind of framed it.
Yeah.
And then I'm doing this project for the government agency, and then they have, it's called Microsoft
Power Automate.
Power Automate. Is that similar, different? And
I think it is. I actually just opened I saw like it was bugging me on it was like telling me like try Power Automate or something, so I clicked on it. I don't have a ton of use with it, but I think we're in the same space, right?
I never tried Power Automate. Just started to play with it.
Yeah.
My only thing I thought was maybe you guys are probably more ubiquitous, and Power Automate's like Microsoft. That was my guess.
I mean, from what my limited usage with the tool, it seems that it's good at interfacing with Microsoft services, but it doesn't have like the same outreach that we do. Yeah.
So, and then I guess a follow-up question is, so I see it more as an automation tool, and I'm guessing where does the AI what piece of the AI?
We are a unified work intelligence platform.
Yes. But Prakar's specialization here in the research of extraction redaction is a very important component of automation. And as a component of the automation, his extraction redaction that he's working on is extremely important to reach accuracy with all the important things. And what Ishan is working on more is really predicting. So creating these templates or smart blocks where you would say, I want to open an Excel spreadsheet and extract this data from it, or I want to write this data into an Excel spreadsheet, that it can automatically just write that or set those steps and that code for it, or you can just tinker and maybe change a few parameters, but you'll have a lot of automation code ready for you. So it's like prompt generated automations.
So when
that's more what.
So there is a function within Huloop where you extract data. Is that going into the Huloop's backend, or is that going to like Azure and then you're using you're leveraging
security and data and
I mean, we use Azure, so I mean, there's a lot of internal pre-processing that we're doing to the data, but in the end, we're trying out different things. We've tried Azure, we've tried like the local tools Mistral, and yeah, it's kind of like the data there's a lot of pre-processing that's involved, and currently it'll go to Azure for like the final step.
So let's say I had like a stack of 100 PDFs.
Yeah.
Right? And they're going to have various types of tables. Now let's say in one document, the table is labeled percentages for a certain year. And the next one is labeled proportion for a certain year. Another PDF is labeled fraction for a certain year, right? Similar concepts, but not an exact name. And what I want to do is integrate those tables that are in those PDFs into a single, say, database.
Yeah.
Right? So how simple would it be?
That's where I think the idea of an agentic layer really comes into play, where at the very least, you as the user need to define some bare bones schema to extract the data into. And say you define the schema as, I want to extract all the percentages from this 100 PDF stack. The agentic layer, there is a certain level of intelligence here where you're sending the data. Ideally, you would be sending the data to some sort of generative model that would be able to make those intelligent decisions like, oh, percent, fraction, decimal, they all kind of mean the same thing. We'll extract them into this field. And actually, that's kind of what you can do. Again, to like get into more of the technical details, that's what you can do with these structured responses, where if you define a pydantic model and you pass it into the OpenAI call, you can actually, in the pydantic model itself, when you're defining the data schema, you can specifically mention in the model comments, I guess, there's a field parameter. And in the description for the field, you can say, extract percentages, extract fractions, extract decimals. And that's possible via these structured responses that I'm a big fan of, as you can tell.
Yeah.
But actually, that person.
You could use the JSON files also, simple open source with the JSON and combination of Python. Simply we can store it in MongoDB, all these 100 PDFs, 100 JSON structure, and we can give this input to the either N8N or anything, temporal. Right. So automatically it will generate the data, whatever format you want. Simple open source or combination of N8N agent, you can create one. Is it accurate? Yeah, definitely. So each PDF, suppose you have percentages, one PDF. Second PDF, you have fractions or whatever. Right. This is one JSON set. This is another JSON set. Right. And it will combine everything and put it into the MongoDB or any database. You can put it straightforward.
So this is connecting N8N, say, to Huloop.
Yes. Oh, no, I'm not talking about Huloop. I'm talking about generic.
Yeah.
Open
okay.
source. Yeah.
No code solution.
Yeah. No question.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.